Welcome everyone, Costin here with my Tretch Craventail campaign overview guide for Total War Warhammer 3, the second legendary lord that starts in the Darklands alongside with Emeric. Now, Tretch Craventail is one of the worst legendary lords in the game by far, but he's still a Skaven legendary lord, and so he benefits from the race. Now, I've done a whole Skaven race guide, so I recommend you guys check that out. I'm going to post a link at the end of this particular video. But what you need to know is that Skaven can steamroll the early game like few other races can, like Greenskins, Skaven, Vampire Count, Warriors of Chaos can do very, very well in the early game. And it's doing well in the early game that is so important to the success of a campaign. But why do Skaven do so well? There's two main things. One is that they increase their local recruitment capacity by 1 for every main settlement building that they have. This is something that the Greenskins also do possess through their main settlement building. So the more territories you hold, the better off you'll be. On top of that, while they don't occupy settlements in a regular fashion, they can spend food to get settlements to a higher level tier. This is a significant advantage early on, less of an advantage later on. Like, the Skaven are fairly weak in the long term, but early game, they're one of the best races in the game. If you've played on Legendary in Warhammer 3, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to dealing with Skaven. Every Skaven Legendary Lord will routinely pump out 3+ stacks of units that they'll throw against you. And regardless of who you are, beating 3 stacks or 2 stacks early in the game can be quite a nightmare. Though the strategy is to deal with individual stacks in isolation and then just defeat them in detail. That's the tactic you need to use against the Skaven on the campaign map. And that's what you should know when you're playing with Craventail. You can swarm your enemies with units. You do have some advantages in this, largely because of your starting position, not because of your faction benefits. So you already will start with an assassin hero that will give you replenishment. You'll have a doom wheel. You'll have 2 units of storm vermin and some death runners, as well as some Skaven slaves, which might as well be thrown away. You can also recruit clan rats and clan rats with spears very early on, and you can get the clan barracks to start pumping out chieftains from very early on in a campaign. Having a lot of heroes, access to heroes very early on in a campaign can be a significant benefit. Furthermore, you do have the Rictus Great Clan Hall, which will give you a substantial amount of income, food, benefit to trade tariffs, tradable resources, and recruitment cost, recruit rank, and immune to psychology for storm vermin units. So you can smash any enemy that you encounter in the Darklands with relative ease early on in the campaign, with the exception of course, Emeric over here. But I'll get to that in just a second. Let's talk about faction-wide benefits. So, you get Scurvy Away has improved effect and grants a minor ward while active. What does Scurry Away do exactly? Well, we look at the situation here. So Scurry Away gives speed and damage resistance of 10% to units. But of course, with a minor ward save active, I think that's the benefit there. The 10% is from the faction-wide benefits. On top of that, Storm Vermin do give encourage while playing as Tretch, so they will provide a leadership benefit to units around them. Furthermore, when you do declare war on a faction, you'll get various benefits. Vanguard deployment, Menace Below +1 use, so you can summon clan rats, enemy reinforcement time, +50%, so reinforcing armies will take longer to show up, and as well as a pretty decent ambush success chance. And this will last 3 turns whenever you declare war on a faction. On top of that, Storm Vermin will also get armor, base weapon damage per experience rank. So this will also apply to clan rats as well, though it's more important for Storm Vermin. But you can recruit clan rats very quickly. So your strategy early game should be to get this clan barracks, should get the Rictus, should take advantage of the Rictus Hall, take out the Orc army here. It's a fairly weak army. You'll absolutely smash it to bits. Take Mount Greyhag. Really use the food of Mount Greyhag to turn this into a tier 2 settlement. This is not something I would generally encourage, but the reason you should do this is because you can then start building a hidden lair from turn 1 over there and get access to the assassin hero, to get night runners with slings, increase your hero capacity for assassins. And with the combination of clan rats that you'll recruit in the first two turns, and then eventually night runners and night runners with slings, you should be able to have a powerful enough army to swarm the other enemies that you're going to be dealing with. Tretch himself, in terms of his skill tree, he gets benefit to raiding, pretty pointless. He does get Tretch Raiders, which affects units within a radius for armor piercing damage, being pretty important in melee attack, as well as base weapon damage. Ambush a success chance, ambush defense chance, evasion chance when using the underway, so you can use it without being intercepted far more often. Campaign movement range for plus 10% after winning a battle. Benefits to clan rats and storm vermin in battles, as well as giving him stock and unstoppable, as well as a leadership benefit. And then coming back, casualty replenishment for your army, so you can get a significant amount of casualty replenishment, as well as regeneration for Tretch. You can also get armor piercing weapon damage. He can survive decently in a battle, though he is not going to be a top tier fighter in a battle. He can be a good distraction, however. Okay, so what should you do with Craventail? Your army should be made up of clan rats. Get a bunch of those early in the game. Once you get the hidden layer, start pumping out night runners and night runners with slings. These won't be as powerful as the night runners or night runners with slings that Snitch can get, but they're still some of the best early game units that Skaven do get. Later on in a campaign, what you may want to really get your hands on would be to get your hands on some powerful artillery. Like you can get Poison Wind Globadiers, Poison Wind Mortars, Plague Lock catapults. All of those are really, really good. I would avoid Rallying Gunners at this time and Giselles, simply because of the many issues that gunpowder units do provide. But you can certainly still benefit from getting the weapons burrow into the arsenal for the artillery, therefore from the Poisoned Wind units. Or you can go into the construction cavern, get engineer recruitment, though you do need a tier 4 settlement to increase the capacity, or rather you need a tier 5 settlement, sorry, to increase the hero capacity for warlock engineers. Engineers are pretty good heroes to have, but yeah, you do need a tier 5 settlement to increase their capacity. They're going to be pretty rare during the course of a campaign, but just being able to recruit one will be pretty substantial, as well as being able to get Plague Claw catapults.
Yes, yes.
Your campaign plan, from my perspective, should be as follows. You take Mount Grey Hag, you get a bunch of units recruited, and you start making your way towards Darkhold, recruiting units along the way. Once Tretch's army is filled, get another army. Maybe even a third along the way. But take Darkhold, get Mount Grey Hag to tier 2, start getting the hidden lair, so you'll be able to recruit units here. Once you take the Darkhold, you do have several choices. But just bear in mind that Emmerich is very likely going to declare war on you. And you don't want Emmerich to be able to get his Dragon Mount. You want to eliminate him before that happens, because once he does that, he's going to be an absolute nightmare in battle. So your next priority should be to eliminate Emmerich. So take Ashridge Mountains, lay siege to the fortress over here, take the Bone Gulch. What do you do after? Well, you have several choices. You can go for Karak Azul, you can go for Skarsnik, take him out. Though going for Skarsnik may not necessarily be the best choice. Yes, he does have a gold mine in his starting capital, but on top of that, if you do take out Skarsnik, you're only really going to benefit Thorgrim, who is going to show up with some fairly powerful units, like heavily armored units that you don't have an easy counter to. So it's better if Skarsnik stays alive. Like, it's an easier fight to take out Skarsnik than it is to take on Thorgrim Grudgebearer on your own. Ideally, you would strike Skarsnik when he's about to topple Thorgrim, or you hit Thorgrim in the back if he's winning against Skarsnik. So take Mount Silverspeed with like a second or third or fourth army, and just pay attention to how things are developing in this particular province. Once the High Place and the World Edge Archway are falling, that might be your opportunity to strike. Or you can send spies to pay attention to what's going on. I'd say going for Karak-Azul once you've taken out Emmerich is probably your better choice. You do start close enough to Quake Headtaker. And what's worth mentioning with Quake is that he'll tend to do pretty okay early on in the campaign, but he will eventually lose. Why will he lose? Well, between the Dwarves, the Crooked Moon Rebels, Skarbrand, Lamia, he is just going to be surrounded by enemies and eventually worn down and defeated. In fact, Skaven Legendary Lords overall in the campaign, with the exception of Snitch, but even he loses, Skaven Legendary Lords tend to do well in the first few turns of the campaign, but then eventually the weight of their enemies masses against them, and they will get wiped out. You want to potentially help Quake. Before that happens, you can eventually confederate him, get him as part of your faction, and actually have him fight your battles for you, because Quake is a substantially better Legendary Lord in battles. In fact, Quake was the guy I was terrified about facing in battles, either Quake or Snitch, or Malice Darkblade if you had to face him early on in a campaign. But that's one plan, the Western plan. You could decide to go east, or you could go north. There are pros and cons to all these approaches. If you go east, you're going to have to fight Gorst with his massive number of zombies. You may even have to fight Greases, though quite unlikely. And then you've got the big, overwhelming threat any Legendary Lord in this entire area has to deal with, and that is, of course, lovely Grimgor Ironhide. What Grimgor does in campaigns, most of the time, the vast majority of times, is he takes this entire province of the Path to the East, he takes out Kolic, and then he starts expanding because he has no one to stop him. By the time even if you were to expand northward very, very quickly, as Tretch, you wouldn't be able to meet Grimgor until he's already become a giant threat. It's probably best to conquer some territory in the south, conquer Karak-Azul, conquer in the west, maybe take the Death Pass province as well, go deal with the Dwarves, deal with Skarsnik, build up massive forces, and then go after Grimgor. Ungrim might become a threat in the campaign, but Ungrim does have to deal with Azag. He does also potentially have to deal with Vlad. You can take over a substantial amount of territory as the Skaven. Only a handful of territorial types like the Magical Forest or Wolf One are uninhabitable for you. That's something you should be aware of. And the cast wastes are unpleasant, though you could still set up settlements there. One of the things I would probably do, though, in a campaign, because this is something you should be aware of, you should always remember this when playing as Skaven, you do have Undercities. And maybe you want to set up Undercities with the Scheme of Doom. So research free technologies, unlock the Scheme of Doom, and start setting up an Undercity. Like, I would send one of those engineers to set up an Undercity over here, for instance, or maybe even in Grimgor's capital, and use those Undercities for income, for food especially. That can be pretty substantial. It can be a great way to generate food for your empire, which is going to become an issue later on. Another way to generate food is to use a commandment, though that's only really worth using in provinces that have 2 settlements. And typically speaking, those do have some downsides. Like, it can be good for food generation, but downside is, of course, that while you might generate food, the economic potential is not going to be there. Skaven do need provinces with a lot of regions free for ideally, if they're going to generate a good amount of income and justify the cost that they're going to put in the settlements. Because the way the Skaven economy does work is it's based on the arcane generator chain into the warpstone reactor, increasing the income from all buildings in a province. To make that worth it, however, I would say you need at least 3 regions in a province to justify the cost you're going to spend on settlements. And there's a lot of provinces which don't have that. Furthermore, by the way, in the mountains of Morn over here, a lot of these regions don't actually have a provincial capital, and because of that, they may not be worth taking. Because without the provincial capital, you cannot get the arcane generator, so you can't boost the economy of the entire province. Just a couple of things to know. There's reasons you might want to expand east, however. And that the main reason would be to meet Snitch, save Snitch before he gets wiped out by Cafe. So what tends to happen is Snitch survives for a decent period of time in a campaign, but then the weight of numbers of Miao Ying and Xiao Ming just wipes him out, takes him out. But you may want to save him, because he's also an incredible fighter. Like, Tretch is ideally suited to be able to save both Queek and Snitch. And if you can confederate or ally both of them, then your campaign situation is going to be vastly improved. You also have the opportunity to go save Frot, potentially, before he gets wiped out, though that is a fairly lengthy journey. And long-term potential, you could go for Ikklaw, and if you do rush for Cafe, you might even be able to save Lord Skrolk. Like, the strongest, the best situation for a Skaven campaign would be if you could get all the Legendary Lords. Alternatively, you could just get the Defeat the Legendary Lords mod, so that when these factions do get defeated, you can just recruit their Legendary Lords. That's also a way of viewing things. You only have one item, by the way, from a quest pal, and it's not really that great of an item either. But it is a quest pal, and quest pals can be incredibly beneficial in a campaign for the simple reason that they do provide temporary casualty replenishment and a significant amount of money. And a lot of them can be pretty easy, though I don't think Tretch is an easy one. In fact, I think it's actually a fairly difficult one, but they can benefit you just with a boost of cash, boost of casualty replenishment. Long term, you should be focusing on maybe getting a couple of Storm Vermin units, though not too many. Don't think that you should play Craventail with the Storm Vermin Doomstack. That's the worst possible plan for him. Maybe one or two Storm Vermin with Sword and Shield for each army, just for the encourage benefit. But really focusing on the Gutter Runners with slings for your army, along with Plague Claws and, of course, Poison Wind Mortars and Globadiers earlier on until you unlock the mortars. I would avoid the monster line. I would avoid the Plague Monks unless you're playing as Skrolk. Monsters if you're playing as Frot. But that's just some of the things you should be aware of. The Darklands, by the way, pretty much suck. So if you can get out of here as quickly as possible, that would be a good idea. But you're playing a Skaven faction, and Skaven, well, tend to be disliked by a significant number of factions. Like, for instance, the Greenskins, you can have decent relations with the Greenskins, but it's still a -10 aversion. Karak Azul, they have a -100 aversion. And don't be surprised if a lot of factions end up having, will just end up declaring war on you the moment you meet them or shortly thereafter, because that's how much people do hate the Skaven. Finally, I should mention, because you're playing with a faction where the vast majority of units are units with low leadership and or low armor, Auto-resolve is not going to work very well for you. It's one of the major downsides of playing as Skaven, because you're going to have to end up fighting a significant portion of battles in Auto-resolve. And I wish they did Auto-resolve better when it comes down to it. Anyway, that's all there is to say. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and stay tuned for more. Next up, I'll probably go all the way here and do Techless. I am unlikely to do Kairos. I'm not interested in doing any of the demonic factions because I think they're all pretty pathetic and weak. But I will do Techless and then focus on the factions here in the Southlands, making my way all the way to the north from there to Kislev and Archeon. Costin here, signing out. Stay tuned for more. And if you do enjoy the content, donate via PayPal or Patreon. I could greatly use your support. It helps keep me going, gives me motivation to put a lot of the work that I am in these videos.